Yo, this is Chris coming to you live from the basement, and this is Facts Over Feelings. In today's episode, I want to unpack something a little bit different. Obviously, it's a topic of discussion as of late, but one of the reasons that people don't talk about it much, and it's my personal opinion, this isn't necessarily a fact, but when people bring it up, they are often labeled anti-Semitic. Any criticism toward Israel is always deemed anti-Semitic, especially in the American media. So I want to unpack that a little bit. I want to unpack the illusion of moral clarity, and I want to unpack the man who's been selling nuclear fear since the 90s. But before we dive into this media manipulation, if you rock with the channel, I need you to do three things for you. For me, is one, smash that like button, two, turn on alerts, and three, come cop some merch. Because again, the truth always feels better in cotton and support the movement. So, with that being said, I want to get into this. And it's the unfortunate truth, but we did it. The U.S. bombed Iran. And as of this video recording, they've struck back. Listen, it doesn't matter if you supported the strike or not. It happened. And what matters now is that we come together before this thing spirals into something much bigger. But to do that, we need to really understand how we got here. And that means calling out the two pillars of this perpetual crisis. One, a United States government manipulated by decades of bad framing. And two, a prime minister who's turned fear into a political brand. So, let's break it down. So one, if we think about Israel, the country's less than 100 years old. When you think about Israel, you think about, and maybe not me per se, but it's portrayed as a country with rich history and rich heritage. But the reality, it's all built on a narrative. And that's not the problem in itself. It's that sometimes the facts don't exactly align. So let's rewind, right, to 1917. And this was the Balfour Declaration. So Britain, still fighting the Ottomans, promises a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Why, you may ask? Because they thought Jewish influence in the U.S. and Russia might help win World War I. At that time, 90,000 Jews lived in Palestine. Over 500,000 Arabs lived in Palestine. No consultation, just colonial cartography. And so to give you a little bit of an illustration of what I'm talking about here, and I want to make this bigger. If you look at the European Jewish population, right, circa 1933, look at these. Eastern Europe, 6.7 million Jews lived there. Central, 1.6 million. 766,000 in Northern and Western. 329,000 in Southern Europe. So 9.5 million Jews in Europe in 1933, right? But we know what happened after that. Then came the Holocaust, literally one of the worst genocides in world history. And it was less than 100 years ago. 6 million Jews murdered. And here's the thing. A lot of the Western powers, they rejected refugees before the war. And a lot of them felt guilty. So when you think about the Jewish population, circa 1933, and you fast forward to Jewish immigration to the state of Israel, look at how this changed. So the approximate number of Jewish immigrants to Israel each year, 1948, 120,000, 1949, 240,000, 1950, 170,000. But before that migration, in 1947, The UN split Palestine 55% to the Jews, who at that time were only 1/3 of the population, right? And the rest went to Palestinians. The Palestinians and the rest of the Arab states, they said, hell no. So in 1948, Israel declared independence. War breaks out. 750,000 Palestinians were displaced. This is what they call Nakba. So just to give you a visual of what that looks like, in 1946, look at the Palestinian land in green, the Jewish land in white. UN partition plan in 1947. Remember I said 55% went to Israel. The rest, Palestinians. And then we had the war break out in 1948. And look how the land distribution changed. A lot more white for the Israel, right? And if we fast forward to the year 2000, Palestinians, they have Gaza and they have some settlements inland, right? So that's a huge, huge story in itself. But the thing about it is that there was a lot of media spin, right? If you think about the headlines in 1948, it was Israel defends itself. But we left out the part where there were entire villages bulldozed off the map. They didn't consult the Palestinians. They sent them a press release after the fact. Just think about that for a second. But where the story starts to take a turn is the Cold War logic and a dictator deals in a pro-Israel lobby from the United States. So in post-World War II, America didn't want independence in the Middle East. We wanted influence. We had this perception that if you were not with us, you were against us. And unfortunately, we feared liberal democracies because they had activists, they had elections and independent agendas. Dictators just signed contracts. So we overthrew leaders around the world, starting with Iran in 1953, Chile in 1973, Congo, Angola, Vietnam. The list is long. And every time we did it, the press, they called it liberation. Meanwhile, Israel became our proxy, a weapons lab with a seat at the UN. So I want to share my screen one more time because I want to go back to 1953, which was the first time this happened.
Time magazine chose Iran's Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, as the 1951 Man of the Year for his efforts to nationalize his country's oil wealth, despite mounting economic pressure from Britain. Mossadegh was Iran's 35th Prime Minister, but his government succeeded in doing what no other Iranian leader was able to do before. He went against British interests in his country and deprived the Navy from securing oil supplies. To understand how important this chapter is in Iran's history and how it shaped its future and its relations with the US, we have to go back to the start of the century, when Iran was still known as Persia. Like many states in the region, Iranian oil wealth was monitored by foreign countries since its discovery. In 1901, the British government encouraged entrepreneur William Knox Darcy to invest in Persia's oil sector. The British brokered a deal between Darcy and the then Shah of Iran, Muzaffar al-Din. Darcy was granted a 60-year concession to prospect, transport, and sell petroleum.
60 years. A 60-year agreement. So the Iranians pretty much lost control of their oil in their country for 60 years. But it gets worse than that.
Natural gas, asphalt, and minerals in 3/4 of the country. Under the deal, the Shah was given a lump sum of £20,000 in cash and a further £20,000 in shares, with Iran set to receive only 16% of the profits. The Darcy Agreement is known historically as the deal that compromised Iran's ability to benefit from its own oil wealth for decades. In 1908, a significant oil reserve was found at Masjid Suleiman in southwestern Iran. It was the world's largest oil discovery at the time, and it set off a wave of exploration that would change the region's future.
So again, think about this. They got to keep 16% of the profits from oil being mined from their home country. Doesn't seem like a great deal, but let's keep going.
After the discovery, the British government bought out the dicey Concession and the Anglo-Persian Oil Company that later became the British Petroleum Company, or BP.
That one really blew my mind. Like, when you really think about that, the modern BP came from the oil that was found in Iranian lands. BP, British Petroleum, green and white. You see them everywhere. It's pretty wild, right? Let's continue.
In 1954. In the coming era, navies and national economies would be powered by oil, replacing coal. Iranian oil helped the British Navy substantially during World War I. Winston Churchill, who secured the purchase of the shares from the Darcy Concession, affirmed the importance of Iranian oil.
Fortune brought us a prize from fairyland beyond our wildest dreams.
For the next 50 years, Iran's vast oil reserves came under British control. That is, until Mossadegh came into power. After World War II, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi's rule was weakened by the rise of nationalist voices in the Iranian parliament. In March 1951, Iranian Prime Minister Hajj Ali Rasmara was assassinated by an ardent supporter of oil nationalization. Shortly after the assassination, nationalists in the Iranian Majlis, or parliament, nominated Mossadegh as their new prime minister. Fearing the strength of the nationalist movement, the Shah was forced to approve Mossadegh's nomination. And in May 1951, the Iranian parliament voted to nationalize the oil industry. Addressing his victory, Mossadegh said in a famous speech,
"Our long years of negotiations with foreign countries have yielded no results thus far. With the oil revenues, we could meet our entire budget and combat poverty, disease, and backwardness among our people."
The nationalization of Iranian oil was a blow to Britain's economic interests and to the survival of the British Empire.
Views of the great refinery at Abadan are sufficient evidence in themselves of its size and importance. This great undertaking, built up over many years by British skill and with British money, has now been evacuated in humiliating circumstances.
Britain took the
Those are actual media clips from back when this was all happening, and you can hear how they're blaming the Iranians for wanting their own oil. It was built by British skill, it was built by British money, but not talking about that money came from the oil from that land and what that could do for those people. So just keep going.
matter to the International Court of Justice and placed an embargo on Iran's oil industry, making it impossible for Iran to sell its newly nationalized oil on the world market. The British hoped that economic pressure would threaten the popularity of Mossadegh and force him out of power. But Mossadegh was adamant.
Abroad, that strange politician Dr. Mossadegh continued on his strange way, refusing every offer for settlement of the oil dispute.
Desperate to regain control of Iran's oil industry, the British government approached the United States to assist in orchestrating a coup against Mossadegh. Harry Truman's administration rejected the idea of a coup in 1952, but when Dwight Eisenhower came to power in 1953, the British were able to persuade him by warning him of Mossadegh's communist alliances.
Demonstrations and riots in the streets of Tehran have followed the usual pattern in that troubled country.
Did you hear what he just said? Communism, communists. Those are the magic buzzwords that always gets Americans moving. If we hear you commie, you communist, you hear it now. You hear it now in modern day politics that, we have socialists and communists, and like it's a part of our culture and the fabric of who we are, unfortunately, and it's not always the case, but I'll continue.
With shouts of "done with the Shah," fanatical leaders have been rallying the people in favor of Dr. Mossadegh.
The initial plan of toppling Mossadegh had failed, but the British and Americans eventually succeeded when they relied on royalists, the supporters of the exiled Shah. The country was divided between the Shah supporters and Mossadegh supporters. This is how pro-Shah demonstrators took over the streets of Tehran. Mobs set pro-Mossadegh newspapers on fire, General Fazollah Zahidi surrounded Mossadegh's residence with tanks, and protesters clashed with his guards. Mossadegh and his cabinet eventually surrendered, and General Fazollah Zahidi became Iran's new prime minister. The US then restored the pro-Western regime of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi to power. This was the first foreign intervention orchestrated by the newly formed CIA. The agency, with the help of British MI6, overthrew the first democratically elected government in the country. It was the beginning of the sequence of events that shaped Iran's relations with the US today.
In the military court at Tehran.
So that's like the beginning of it all. That's the beginning, right? So we have Israel. So we overthrow government. Then we have Israel, and they became our proxy, a weapons lab with a seat at the UN. And then came AIPAC, right? For those that don't know, it's the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, which is a policy gatekeeper and a campaign kingmaker. If you cross them, your reelection chances drop like Palestinian infrastructure. It's pretty sad. So if you think about this, the media always spins our action as a course correction, or, every airstrike is defensive, right? But we didn't stop communism. We just rebranded colonialism with better suits. That is all we did, which kind of brings me into the point number 3, right? And this is Netanyahu, the guy who consistently cries about nuclear being a thing. Since 1995, Netanyahu's been yelling Iran is months away. 1995, 2003, 2008, you name the year. I mean, he even had a cartoon bomb at the UN in 2023. So, again, you don't believe me, I'll show you.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly if they wanted to do it.
Iran is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
Iran is gearing up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years.
If not...
So, again, this is since when? 1995. So we're talking 30 years. And here's the thing. Iran enriches uranium. Uranium itself is, when they talk about the enrichment process, there's 2 isotopes that have to be separated with centrifuges. And that technology does not exist everywhere. Iran does have some of the technology, right? They enrich it to 60%, which is not bomb grade. Bomb grade is 90%, okay? But the thing that alarms people is that for energy, say if you want a nuclear power plant, you don't have to enrich past 5%. So yes, Iran was definitely being a habitual line stepper recently, and it's scary. But we had a deal. We had a deal with Iran where they were capped at 3.67%. We slashed the stockpile by 98%. They had daily inspections and delay breakout by over a year, right? But peace kills Netanyahu's brand. It does. I mean, if you think about it, it's been 30 years. We haven't seen this nuclear weapon, right? And they clearly have the capability to do so. And they didn't enrich over that 5% target when they were in the nuclear deal. They didn't start to break it until after we pulled out. So if you think about this, every single time Netanyahu is indicted, Gaza gets bombed. And the Israelis, they're protesting in Tel Aviv, in the courts, in the streets. Not every Israeli supports Bibi. Many are terrified of him. And that's a fact. He came back into power by allying with ultranationalists, the kind that essentially say the quiet part out loud. Right? Think about that. It's been 30 years. Iran has been weeks away for 30 years. Still no follow-up, no receipts. This man's been yelling fire in the theater for 30 years, and the media keeps handing him matches. Like, that's crazy. But I think the worst part about that is Israel has nuclear bombs that don't exist. So Israel never signed the NPT, which is the global treaty to stop nuclear spread. So the deal essentially is, if you don't have nukes, don't build them. If you do, work toward disarmament, and everyone gets inspected. Iran signed it, Israel did not. Israel has an estimated 90 to 200 warheads built at Dimona, exposed by a whistleblower and Vanunu in 1986. Mossadegh kidnapped him and locked him up for 18 years. The U.S., well, we made a deal in 1969. Don't admit it, we won't ask. And every American president since then has lived up to that agreement. So, for the scoreboard, for the people watching, Israel has nukes, no inspection. Iran's no nukes, daily inspections. But for 30 years, we've been told Iran is inching toward capability. But the story is never Israel's nuclear stockpiles grow. Israel built the bomb, right? Iran just built the narrative, I guess. So, and to kind of wrap that all up for you, I'll just play this last clip so you can see for yourself.
Israel has had nuclear weapons since the 1960s in direct violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which they, of course, refused to sign in the first place. Israel has somewhere between 90 and 200 nuclear warheads as part of its military arsenal, and to this day has never openly admitted to possessing such weaponry. They've also consistently refused to allow inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency to visit their nuclear facilities. They even had a strategic technological partnership with apartheid South Africa, where they aided the apartheid government in building and successfully testing a nuclear weapon in 1979. Under its own laws, the U.S. is prohibited from providing aid to countries that have weapons of mass destruction in contravention of the NPT. And as the U.S. pursues all-out war against Iran, a country with no nuclear weapons to speak of, Israel benefits from the full military backing of the U.S. and receives a higher proportion of U.S. aid than any nation in the world.
So, we give them aid. The countries surrounding don't have nuclear weapons. We're not fighting a war on terror. We're fighting a war on truth. Israel's founding was all about sympathy and strategy. It's media coverage, myth, and maintenance. Netanyahu isn't defending Israel. He's defending himself. And we, America, we just keep signing the checks. I will say this as loud as I possibly can. I'm a proud American and I love this country. But we could have led with diplomacy instead of bombs. We chose fear. We chose shortcuts, and now we're out of excuses. So anyways, if this resonated with you, if you learned something new, I want you to drop a comment below. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because these are the things that, if you made it this far, you're not just scrolling, you're searching. Hit that subscribe button and share this with one person who actually thinks. And if you're ready to keep pushing past that noise, tap the box on the screen. I'll see you there.